Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Vivid Festival Hair with the one and only KimberlyTayHair. I'm Julia. I'm your Booksy moderator. Happy to have all of you here today. Oh, the reactions are already coming in. So as people are joining, you can see I've dropped a message in the chat. You can post your questions for Kimberly here is what it says, and that is indeed true. So hello to Melanie, we see you. Hello to Regina, so excited for this class. So glad. I'm so excited too. It's going to be amazing. So as people are slowly joining the webinar, we're going to start out by me stopping talking, handing the mic over to the amazing Kimberly herself. Kimberly, tell us a little bit about yourself and why we should be so excited for today's class.
Well, first, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody who's already joining on. I love seeing all these comments already. My name is Kimberly Ibbotson. I go by KimberlyTayHair on most social media platforms. I am Northern California raised, and I have been living in Los Angeles for about 4 years. My background was actually in blonding, which is a vital part of learning how to apply creative color, which led me to get into creative color, and it's become like my ultimate passion in so many different forms. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys. It's my absolute favorite thing to educate. And it's like those little tips and tricks that you may not know that can completely change the way that you do work behind the chair. So I'm excited to share with you guys what we created today. And yeah, I'm just happy you guys are all here joining us on your day off probably. So thank you.
Brilliant. Beyond looking forward to this. So everyone, I'm going to be dropping some links in the chat as we go, including the very first links I've dropped in. If you are not already following Kimberly on Instagram, first of all, what are you doing? And second of all, as soon as this webinar ends, make sure that you do. All of the links that I drop in will be available at the end. So let's get going, Kimberly. What are we going to be studying today?
Okay, so today, obviously, the base of the class is creative color, and we have 1 hour, so I wanted to make sure that I can give you guys a lot of information and a couple different techniques and theories as to how I create different color melts. So the base of this first panel was just a traditional color melt. This color melt is a little bit easier to be blended, so it's a lot easier to work through. And then the second panel, I wanted to do something completely different. I started with the lightest point of color and blended down to the darkest point of color. And obviously this panel isn't as easily blended, so it does take a little bit longer. But believe it or not, these are both 3 colors. So this is 3 colors here and 3 colors here. And this bottom color is the same color I used up here. And that just kind of showcases how one color with different color melts can impact the way that it turns out on the canvas. So yeah, initially I was just gonna show you guys this technique or 2 different techniques just to demonstrate this, but I love the way that this turned out. And so I ended up adding a money piece in the front to kind of balance out both. So on this side, I'm gonna be doing the same thing, but reverse. I'm going to be doing the money piece, the cool colors, and the front section, the warm colors. So we're going to go over this first section. I used all Pravana color for this color melt. I used aquatic with a dash of neon green in it. I used neon green with a dash of neon yellow, and then the bottom was straight neon yellow with a dash of the traditional yellow. And then for the second color melt, same formula. This is neon yellow with just a dash of the regular yellow. This is Sunstone, which is their orange and pink based color with a little bit of their pastel pink. And then the bottom color was lilac with a drop of their straight violet and diluted with a lot of conditioner. So yeah, that's the formula for those. Maybe we can kind of pin that in the comments later before we end. And I'm kind of just going to jump into it. And like Julia said, feel free, please ask questions along the way. I absolutely love talking and I love informing you guys, maybe something that I missed that you want to know. So don't be shy. And yeah, I'm really excited to get started. So to achieve this, what I did was a traditional 4-quadrant. I ended up keeping that money piece out at the end. That was literally such an impulsive last minute decision, but it ended up great. So the first thing I'm going to do is section out this front quadrant. And I just take that from about the nape, the back of the, or the crown, the back of the head right there, all the way down, straight right behind the ear. I do have a little bit, I don't know if you guys will see, a little bit of leftover color. I've used this before. So the yellow right there may not pick up as well. Obviously, if you're working on a regular like canvas or a client, you want to make sure all that pigment is moved out before. There was blue there, so we did our best. But
So we have a couple questions already. First of all, hello to Shelly, who says, watching from Oregon, I'm at school right now. It's a student at Fagan School of Hair Design in Portland, Oregon. So that's so cool. Hi. And then Melanie is wondering, when you say a dash, do you mean like a ribbon or like a pea amount of the color?
Like maybe a dime size amount. I use a very small amount because, I mean, it depends also, let me rephrase that. It depends also on how much product you have. So say I used a tube worth of color, I use maybe a dime size of the other color. But if you're using two, then you obviously have 2 tubes, and you obviously have to like measure for that as well. For me personally, especially when it comes to clients, one thing they love about the work that I do is it's all custom. I almost don't want to be able to fully recreate something, if that makes sense, because for me, it gives that client like clarity that it's theirs. So I'm not like a huge fan on like, I mean, I measure my toners, I measure my lightener, obviously, but with colors, I kind of just eyeball it. And I feel like that's what's so fun about our job and what makes us feel like artists, because it's just kind of whatever we create that, you know, becomes fun. But I obviously do keep track of what I do if my clients end up wanting that same formula. But really, it's just like kind of a free feeling of like, okay, I added that in there. Perfect. I always mix it. If I feel like I need more, I'll add a little bit more. But with Pravana, especially their neons, they are so pigmented. So when you're adding neon colors, a little bit makes a big difference, especially if you're adding green into blue or yellow into blue or whatever. It's like very important to make sure you start with the smallest amount and then work your way up. But that is a good question.
A semi-similar question from Heather. Well, first of all, Lenan, this is a mannequin. We will get into this distinctions of some of what Kimberly does when it comes to wigs a bit later. But this is a mannequin to answer your question. And then Heather is wondering, can you always dilute semis with conditioner? And if so, what is the best kind, or to you, does it not matter? And she's specifying from the use of Pulp Riot and getting the clear, and says it's very expensive. I go through a lot of it. So do you find that you can always dilute semis?
You know, I do always opt for using like the actual clear diluter. Pravana actually has 2 different ones. They have a pastel and then they have a clear, which one of them makes the hair like literally pastel, which is what conditioner and a clear would do. The other one actually just intenses the vibrancy while adding volume to the color, which is really cool because it's essentially the same color. It just is like adding more to it without having to use the tubes. It dilutes it a little bit, but it keeps that vibrancy and that like depth intact. So if I can, I use clear. But if, you know, I'm using 6 bottles of one color, it's a little bit, and then using all of those, yeah, they are expensive. It does add up. So I find that using conditioner is just as great. I would just be careful with certain brands. Sometimes it does change the consistency of the color, maybe won't saturate as well. And that's the one thing that you should look for. With Pulp Riot, I have found that it does change the consistency a little bit. And you don't want to overwork Pulp Riot colors because the saturation and the color will not be the same. Pravana, I don't have as big of a problem with that. And one thing that I've also noticed that helps is that I use an oil, a B3 oil in all of my products. That helps kind of liquefy the colors a little bit more. And I feel like that helps it spread so much more. So especially when I'm using conditioner in my colors, I use a ton of oil in it because it definitely helps, I guess, spread a little bit easier. But yeah. It does lather if you overwork Pulp Rights. I saw someone say that. And that's so important to know because some people just try and push color in there. And you really don't want to do that with any color line. If you see that you're getting good saturation, you know, kind of like leave it be because it doesn't need to be overworked. You know, the right amount of saturation. I feel like sometimes we like see one little thing and we keep going and then we keep going and we keep going. And that's just because our nature, we're perfectionists. But it is important to just be like, okay, this is a good saturated block. I'm going to stop right there and just move forward. But yeah, Pulp Riot especially is very, will get lathered if you overwork it too much. So, okay, so I'm gonna start on this back section first, just because the blue, green, yellow color melt is quite a bit easier to work through. So we're gonna start with that. Probably able to get through the whole section and then start on the front section after that. So if you guys have any questions about anything, especially regarding this color melt and these colors that I'm using right now, please let me know.
So we have a technical question while you're sectioning out.
Yeah.
Amy is wondering, what app or process do you use to keep track of client colors when you have that that you do want to?
I use Booksy, obviously, for everything. And the great part about Booksy is that there's a notes section. And back in the day when I first started, I've been doing hair for 10 years, I had like an old school, like, book. And I always had like a binder full of notes. I'm not even kidding. It was like a big giant thing. And I would write down the notes for my colors. Because like we literally don't ever remember the stuff we do. Like even if it's like a 6 in, sometimes you're just like, was it a 6 in or was it a 5? So yeah, Booksy, the great part about it is I can write down everything that I did on my client, especially if at the end of the appointment, they're like, oh my gosh, I loved this. Don't ever forget this. I'll just write it down in my notes. And then her next appointment, or if I just go click on her name on the app, it'll pop up all of those things that I've saved for her in her history, which is great because, like I said, we do tend to forget things. We want to think we'll remember, but we don't. Another thing that I found helps is I swatch stuff down, and if I really like it and I'm like, okay, I want to keep this for next time, I'll swatch it down and I'll write down the formula and just keep that swatch. So then, you can look at it later on and make sure that it's the one that you were thinking of. So that's important too. Yeah, Booksy definitely makes everything as far as that goes really easy for me. And anything to make my job easier. So the first color I'm going to be applying here is going to be, I'm going to section this one out even further because we just don't want to chance it. Is going to be the aquatic color. I'm applying that at the base. With these shorter sections, I try and spread it out pretty evenly. The green's gonna get lost in the yellow. That's kind of my intention. I want it to be a little bit brighter at the ends, but not necessarily look like I have 3 colors right there. I want it to be a really soft, seamless gradient like this color is over here versus this one is a lot more distinguished where those colors kind of meet each other because obviously they don't naturally blend as well. So this color palette is like one of my absolute favorites. I just like anything with neon green or neon yellow. If you can't tell by my sweater, is my favorite. So we're gonna get started. I use a pretty small amount of color to start, especially on dry hair. I've known on bright hair, it takes a lot quicker. So you don't wanna have too much product on because then it is gonna, spread a little bit too far down. And I wanna make sure that I'm evenly bringing out these colors. So I start on the bottom and I just flick it up and then I bring it down, paint the top. And I'm a big hand painter, so I'll always bring it down and I'll just pull this. I feel like it gives me a little bit cleaner of a melt. So I don't like to have hard lines because these colors saturate really quickly. And what I've found over time is that if you create that line of demarcation and don't have time to blend the next color into it, it's going to be a pretty obvious line of demarcation. Okay, so this is the green chartreuse color, just blowing color everywhere. And then I'm gonna take my color brush, and instead of going back and forth this way, I first take the end of it and I very meticulously blend where those 2 colors meet first. That kind of creates, because once those 2 colors meet, they make another color, and that's what's going to give you that really seamless. And then I'll go through and I'll saturate that way. I'll bring it back down and I will go vertically again. And I do this until I feel like that line is blended really nicely. And then after that, I'll bring this down softly. And then I'll take my third color, which really isn't super far off from my green color. Like I said, I just wanted a slight difference. I'm gonna put a towel on me real quick, guys, sorry. Because I'm gonna need to wipe my hands every single color. That's another really important thing too, is I feel like people underestimate how much you really need to get that color off because one tiny mistake makes a very, very visible mistake in the hair. So with dark colors, especially when you're working with something this dark and this light, you wanna make sure that you wipe every single section. So that is the first color melts. I see that I missed a tiny little spot right up here, so I'm just gonna go back in and saturate that. And there we go. Another really important part, if you guys aren't aware, which I'm sure you are and should be, it's that section size is so important for optimal saturation. If you take too big of a section, what you'll notice is when you pull this up, something down here is not going to be saturated as much, and that can create hollow spots in the hair. And when her hair is this light and you're going this bright, it is so noticeable. And my rule of thumb is like, everyone's like, well, it's underneath or it's in the back. I look at it as wigs. Once I started selling wigs, when I send that wig to a client, they can look through every single piece of the hair. You want to look at it the same way for your clients because, one, that means you take pride in your work, and two, it just makes no room for you to like create mistakes. You know what I mean? If you develop that consistent process throughout, you're going to have a super clean, super even, super saturated section every single time. So take your time. It doesn't need to be worked through fast. It needs to be worked through right.
So we had a great question earlier that I think would fit well here from Melanie. Melanie is a new cosmetologist and is wondering, how long did it take you to learn color? And did you find that you were messing up a lot trying to get to where you are today?
How long did it take me to get color? Man, I mean, I still sometimes feel like I'm learning, you know, like I feel like there's things that we do every day that we're like, wow, I'm going to do that differently, or just like those little like aha moments that change. But from when I started taking an interest in color to where I am now, is it okay if I turn this way? You guys can still see, right? Is that okay? Because it's, yeah. I don't want to like right in front. Okay, I just want to make sure. So I would say it probably took me the first year of feeling like everything I did was like good and bad, if that makes sense. Like I was proud of it because I was like, wow, this is pretty, but I would see that one piece that I'm like could have been different, or she had hot roots, or you know, just little things here and there. Like I loved it, but I hated it at the same time. I was very like hard on myself. But I think at a certain point, I kind of decided that the most important thing I can do was trial and error. You know, I took a lot of classes, I educated myself as much as I can, and I just did so much hair. I had models left and right. I had like mannequin heads that I would play with. I worked on myself. I just knew that I wouldn't learn the right or wrong way to do things if I wasn't practicing. So that's really all that it took. And I would say, you know, for me to feel like I really did it, like I got to a place where I was like really confident in what my work was like giving, probably like, you know, 2 years of like really diving in and like getting everything done, you know? So don't be hard on yourself though. Like I still make mistakes. We're human. Like, and I think that that's important to know too, is that a lot of the times we're very critical of ourselves. I mean, I literally am like, I have such high expectations for myself and my work. And I think that the more work you do that you're really proud of, the harder you're going to be on yourself later on. And that's one thing to remember, is that we are human. We will make mistakes, and we're not going to learn if we don't try, and we're not going to grow if we don't try. So just keep going at it. If there's something that you're really interested in learning, just practice it as much as you can.
So excellent question relating to something that you just mentioned from Nancy. How would you correct in case we stained a light section with the dark color? So if you've just noticed that you've hit a section with the wrong color, how do you correct that in the moment?
In the moment, what I will do, if it's so bad that it literally cannot be fixed or blended or hidden or anything like that, not hidden, but you know, blended and like kind of fixed around without lightener, is I would probably stop everything I'm doing, grab lightener, maybe like a 5 volume. It should push the color right out. But even with, especially with dark colors like this, if they sit too long, they'll grab. Because even like that front section, remember I said I had blue in there, you can still see a little bit of color. And I used lightener to remove that with a 5 volume. The ends came out perfectly because that was the green and the yellow. The base color didn't. So if the longer you let it sit in there, the harder it's going to be to remove. So if it's something you feel like you can't fix, I would immediately just get lightener and try and remove that. Sometimes, you know, like a water or shampoo, like real quick can brush it out. But I feel like all in all, lightener is going to be your best option. But that's another reason why it's really important to just take your time. Like I've been doing hair for 10 years, like, which is crazy to think, but I still don't charge hourly because I take a long time. If I charge hourly, they're going to be like, oh my God, she took like 4 hours just to do this color. But it's because I'm really sure and confident that that color is going to turn out great. So it's difficult, but it can be done. And your best friend's going to be this. And sometimes halfway through, like when my gloves get too dirty, you can already see they're super stained. I'll switch gloves. I run through gloves like crazy, which is like so bad because like they're like $500 now, I feel like. But it's important to make sure that you have super clean hands, and like that way when you're going into your next section, you're like avoiding as much like mistakes as absolutely possible. So that is a good question though, because that is important, you know. On these kind of colors, they definitely would be pretty visible. Another thing that I find, especially with mannequins and wigs, is that they shed a lot. I don't know, you know, a lot of clients can too, but making sure that there's like no long hairs in your hand or on your brushes, which I need to make sure, because those hairs will cause so much problem, and those are the hairs that are going to drag onto the others. So just making sure like you're looking at everything with like, see, there's one that just creeped up out of nowhere. But there we go. So we're just going to let that guy fall down, because if that gets color on it, it's going to drag onto the rest, and that's just going to be miserable. But
so you just made a really great distinction. One of the things that you are most known for is your absolutely amazing vivid color wigs, to the point that not everyone in here may have actually seen you with your natural color that you're sporting today. Would you tell us a little bit about how that came about, and also how your process might differ if we had a wig right now versus mannequin head?
Yeah, I love talking about the wigs because it is one of those things that kind of like put me on a path that I wasn't even like planning for. And I just love those. I feel like the best paths in life are ones that are just so unexpected. And so the reason I started getting into wigs, this hair, there we go, go away. The reason I started getting into wigs actually was because I had a really bad hair experience on myself. My hair was super over processed, and I had a really bad chemical cut, and I ended up having to cut like literally all of my hair off. I had a pixie cut. It wasn't by choice this time, and so it just was one of those things that I wasn't wanting. And so I started coloring wigs. One, I was in a new city. I thought it'd be good marketing. I think that I knew I needed to like put some content out, but I had no clients, and it was really hard for me to build. And two, I was like, wow, I can put them on myself and, you know, model them my own. And that way, if I'm walking around, someone can stop me and say, hey, I love your hair. And I'll be like, thanks, I did it. And then on top of that, I'd be like, also, it's a wig, and I make those. So it's like advertising, marketing, and like just putting myself out there, and also like making me feel really confident with my hair, because at the time I just did not. So that's how it started. It was so unexpected and unplanned. And then during the beginning of quarantine and COVID, someone suggested that I should start trying to sell them, and I did, and it like took off and went really well. And it just showed me that there's so many different avenues in this industry that we don't have to just like dedicate ourselves to one thing. We can be specialists, absolutely, but we can use that specialty to so many different things. I have creative color clients behind the chair. I have creative color wigs that I sell. I do creative color buzz cuts. So that one thing doesn't have to just be limited to this specific thing. It doesn't have to just be that one thing that's your niche. You know, you can kind of like spread that out across the table, because you never know how much more you might like that. But the thing about wigs is that they are a lot different than coloring, human hair on actual heads. They definitely have a little bit more of a mind of their own. Mostly because when you buy, extensions or hair, you don't really know where that hair comes from, so we don't know the history of it. Whereas when a client sits in our chair and we lift them, we know what products we use to get them there. We know the porosity of their hair when it's wet. We know all of those kind of things and how it's going to saturate. So it is a lot more difficult to grasp the concept of coloring a wig as far as saturation goes, as far as how it sits on the head, which is why we chose today to color a mannequin, because coloring a wig, the tightness of the cap on the actual mannequin is the most important thing, because without that tension, whereas like on a human head or on a mannequin, there's no looseness to it, you know what I mean? And that can definitely help or prevent you from having like a clean, even color palette, because tension is one of the most important things when it comes to coloring and color melting, I should say. So. But yeah, wigs are definitely fun, and it's also fun to be able to like my own natural hair now. I actually told her I was gonna wear a wig today, and it's just really hot in here, and I was like, I don't know if I could like work under that. I'd be like over here sweating. So yeah, you guys get to see my real hair, which I actually just did. I didn't color it for 6 months, and I was trying to do that whole, I'm not going to color my hair thing. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Here we are.
I'm sure none of us in this webinar know anything about being unable to resist coloring your hair. Not this group. No.
No, not this group for sure.
So just wanted to shout out everyone. Your questions are amazing. Keep adding them. I am keeping track of them. So if you haven't heard the answer right away, we will get to it. But your questions are fantastic. Thanks, everyone, for participating so much.
Yes, I really appreciate it. For me, like, I'm a conversationalist. I feel like all of us are in this industry. And for me, the best way that I learned everything that I know was by asking questions. My mom even said when I was a kid, like, that's all I ever did was just ask a ton of questions. And I mean, if you think about it, that's how we learn. So just make sure that you're not, limiting yourself because you're like, well, what if that's a question that somebody like is like, we should already know that. But, nothing is like that. And like I said, it's those little aha moments that like completely change the way that we do everything. So.
Exactly. We have a great question, and we can wait till the end if you'd like, but we have a question about aftercare. Do you have particular aftercare products, any shampoos, conditioners that you recommend to your clients when you're caring for color like these? And I'm going to tack onto that. Does that answer change for you if they are doing something with a wig and they're looking at pure styling versus their own hair?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's a really important question. For me, the basis of like at-home hair care is just making sure that they have a good shampoo and conditioner and that they understand how frequently they should be washing their hair, what temperature the water should be when they're washing their hair. And that kind of just goes without saying for all colors across the board. However, creative color, and I'm sure you guys are aware, creative color, it has a lot more impact the more you put heat to it. If my client had this hair and she went directly in the ocean, for instance, it'd be gone. She just like would not have the color anymore. So, just educating your clients on what is important, what they should or should not be doing or be aware of at least, especially, summertime. I have like a ton of clients at Coachella right now, and they all got these big houses with pools, and those pools have chlorine. So just making sure that they're aware and mindful of the things that can affect it, and the products that they should be using, which for me, a good shampoo, conditioner. And I don't want to say one specific brand because everybody's hair is different. I feel like there is shampoos and conditioners that are very universally accepted for all different hair types. However, I feel like it's important to narrow down what your client is needing for her hair, not even regarding the color, and then just making sure that it is color safe and color friendly. I would say it does change with wigs as well. The difference is that they really don't need to be washing their wigs that much, which is great because then that color is going to last a long time. But really, wigs are human hair. And so when I explain it to clients, I say treat it as such. Treat it as if it is attached to your own head. Make sure that you're not doing anything you wouldn't do to your own hair. Like, just because it's not yours or attached to you doesn't mean you should just be putting 400 heat on it and like frying it off. That's just not going to get you anywhere good. And yeah, I think that it's important to just make sure that you're narrowing down each specific client because everybody has different needs. And making them feel informed and educated is really helpful. And that's another thing I really like to go over. I feel like a lot of people, expect their clients to know something, but they don't need to. It's not their job to. It's our job to inform them. I may be educating you guys right now, but really all of us are educators. Like whether we're educating other artists or we're educating our clients, we have the knowledge, and that's why you guys are here to gain more knowledge to then be able to share with other people. And one thing that I found over the years, it took me a long time to be like outwardly confident with my work. And I feel like it's really important to be because our clients absorb our confidence. It makes them feel confident. It makes them feel comfortable. So the more you're giving them information wise, the more they'll trust you, the more they'll trust your work, and the more they'll trust your word moving forward. So it's really important to make sure you extend that information and to not like shun anybody for not knowing something because again, they come in there not knowing a thing. They could ask for balayage, but really they want like a full platinum card. You know what I mean? So it's our job to educate and inform them and help them and make them feel like, okay, like this person cares about me and my hair, so I'm going to care about me and my hair. That was a really good question. And I probably like tailed off into 5 other subjects, but good coverage. So like I said, I definitely take a little while to go through stuff, especially when I'm talking. It usually doesn't take me this long with the client, but I still do very tedious, meticulous sections, and I'm just very mindful of how much product I'm putting on and how big the sections are that I'm taking. And the reason that I go underneath is because, again, remember I said when you pull it up, if it's not fully saturated underneath, it's like, that's a whole nother problem. You're going to have hollow spots. And even though that's the bottom of this section, it could be the top if she wears her hair half up. So it's important to make sure that you are fully saturating each section. I'm gonna have to drop this down in a second. It's getting a little too tall.
So we have a quick question. How thin are these sections that you're taking? Regina is wondering.
So these sections I'd say are a quarter to about a quarter of an inch. With the mannequin head, her hair is a little bit more fine. I feel like that does differ depending on each person's hair, like as far as how much density they have on their head. But for this, it's about a quarter of an inch. And that's usually typically what I take, sometimes an eighth of an inch if I really need to. My rule of thumb is like if I put a newspaper down on this person's hair, I want to still be able to visibly see the words. I've always thought that that's okay. That's the section that I should be taking, you know what I mean? Because then you're going to get full coverage for those sections. So it does depend on each person. However, I find that about an eighth to a quarter of an inch is usually optimal for this kind of stuff.
I just want to give you a couple of the thank yous. So Alina says, whoa, I go to beauty school for cosmetology. I feel like I'm learning more with you. Kind of scary, but we take that as a compliment, and it's because you are the master that you are.
Oh, that is so sweet. That is so, so sweet. And I feel like also, it's funny, like when I went to beauty school too, like I said, it was 10 years ago, and I'm from a really, really small town. It was the only beauty school in that town, and it's actually sadly closed now. But I learned so much more outside of beauty school, or even the classes that I took in beauty school outside of that. So first, I want to congratulate you, one, on being in school, and two, for continuing your education already, like while you're still in school. I feel like a lot of people don't even start that part of their journey until they're even done with school. And it's so important to start your education outside of beauty school as soon as you can, because it is a lot different. I'm not saying that the beauty schools are not, wonderful and amazing. There's a lot of incredible schools, and there's a lot of schools and teachers that care. However, their basis is really just to give you the fundamentals of how to really pass and get your license. And then once you step into the real world of like hair, it's so much different. So good for you for learning, because you're putting yourself literally so far ahead of other people in the industry who are in school who maybe aren't thinking, oh, wow, I should go and take this class with this person. Investing in yourself early on is going to get you so far, I promise you. I probably could have done this in half the time that I did if I would have done the same thing as you. You know what I mean? So good for you. I'm really proud.
And just to let everyone know, I have just dropped a link in the chat. You can also find this link if you are on any of our social media, such as the Booksy Biz Instagram, and you go to the link in our bio. But I've just dropped a link for our upcoming Booksy education webinars. And in that, you can see upcoming education that we have. We have an Ambassador Bootcamp Broader Beauty Edition 1 coming up, where you can learn when someone like Kimberly isn't doing what she's doing right here, what it means to be an ambassador from the Booksy perspective and what we look for. We have an upcoming webinar on May 23 that's Show Your Work Instagram Reels. And that's actually being led by Brian Senatore, by Big Yam's Hair, who is currently up for the Positive Influencer of the Year Awards and the Barbara Grammys. So that's going to be really great. And it's open. All of these are free. They're open to anyone in the broader beauty community. Obviously, we would love to have our Booksy community here, but you do not need to be part of the Booksy community to join these. Our main goal is providing ongoing education for everyone. And on that note as well, if there's anything in this webinar with Kimberly that you're going, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm going to remember that point, and it's amazing, stay tuned, because you will be able to find this webinar as well as our other Booksy education webinars on the Booksy YouTube page. So just so you know, you can find things there as well.
Yeah, I love that you guys have this. And again, touching on the topic of education, is that you guys are literally offering free education, which even in an hour can be very impactful for all these people. And I think that that's honestly so amazing. So,
well, it's the fact that we get to partner with educators like you that makes a difference. So, and with that, with that being said, I'm going to go back to some questions for you now, because we have a lot of them. I have everyone's working to get through them. This one is from Cheyenne, asked several questions in a row. I'm going to give you two of them. So Cheyenne specifically wants to know, how much do you charge for applying these techniques? But maybe if you can give that more broadly in terms of hourly versus overall.
Yeah.
Then we've also got a question about, do you have any concerns about bleeding with wigs, about bleeding from the wig hair to the bio hair? So let's start with that question on price charging, and then we'll go back to the other
Yes. Okay. Prices, I feel like, are so subjective to each artist, obviously. And for me, they're subjective to each client because, you know, I really, like I said, I don't charge hourly because I take my time. If my client's there for 8 hours, I don't want them to be like, oh my gosh, like she could have done it in 6 and it would have been this. So for me, I charge hourly, but in my head. If I know something's going to take me 8 hours, how much does my product cost? And how much do I want to be paid hourly? Like, what do I think is, like, you know, fair for me to be paid in total, you know, for the service? So I really kind of just do it that way. I have a base price. And the great part about Booksy is that all of that information is actually online. I have all of my prices for what I charge, at least the base price on there. For this, it is, I'll give you two examples because there's probably 10 different examples. If I had a client come in with already platinum hair, which that's just never going to happen, but if it did happen, I would, for this technique, have a base price probably of $250. Again, I have 10 years of experience, but that doesn't mean anything. I feel like the amount of work that you put in, even if it's in a year, you could have the same technical experience as I have at that point if you're really investing in your education. I feel like people are afraid to charge too much because they're like, well, I've only been doing hair for 2 years. Well, are you delivering quality work? That's the most important question. If you're delivering quality work, you can charge completely at your value with reason, and your confidence is going to help people be like, yeah, that's worth that money, you know? So again, that's if they came in with like the platinum card already, which if that ever happened, I'd be so happy. But if it was a client who came in with like completely virgin hair and her hair was about this length and I had to take her all the way to this level of lightener and then I had to do this, in my head, I technically charge $150 an hour for color corrections or transformations. And something like this would probably take me, I would say, about 7 or 8 hours. So it would be my base price in my head of 150 times that amount of work. So, but again, I don't really establish that with my clients. I kind of just do that math in my head because I know my work well enough to know how long each thing usually takes me. And I think that that's important too, is to narrow down how long each client takes you, what certain projects take you. And if you're not sure of what your client's hair density is, say it's a new client, consultation is key. If you have a consultation beforehand, you can map out your day and you don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I thought you had way less hair than this and I have at 4 o'clock and I'm not going to be done with you till 6. It's really important to be prepared. And again, that is nobody's responsibility but ours, because we are the ones who are, you know, giving that service. So consultations are so important, and I definitely do them if I have a client who's new and I haven't seen her before and she wants some crazy kind of change like this. So, but yeah, refer to my Booksy page for booking or for, you know, price inquiries, and just, you know, I guess you can use that as a map for what you maybe feel like you want to get to a point of charging too. Or maybe if you're already at a point where you should be giving yourself a raise, you know, I'm happy to talk to you guys about that too. I feel like a lot of people don't value themselves enough and the work that we put in and the hours that we put in and the physical pain that, you know, it comes with. It's really important to make sure you're like giving yourself enough credit and enough value. So, and I forgot that second question. So if you want to give me that one.
Absolutely. And that was perfect. I don't know if you saw the reactions, but there were lots of good reactions to that one. So yeah. The second question comes to, do you worry, is there any bleeding from wig onto bio hair with the type of vivid colors that you do?
There absolutely can be bleeding, but one thing I've learned, and I don't just do this with mannequins, with wigs, with my clients, I do with like everything, buzz cut, long hair, short hair, whatever it is. I let that color sit the full time. I let it sit to a point, especially if it's a wig, you don't have to, you know, you could spend the whole night with that wig. You don't have to like send her home at a certain time. So I let my wigs and my buzz cut colors sit to a point of where it's completely dry, like where it's dry to the touch, because when it is completely saturated that way, I swear you're gonna have zero, like little to no bleeding at all, even rinsing the color out. Pulp Rite especially, very, very unlikely to have any kind of bleeding at all. With other color lines that you may not have like as much like, you know, knowledge or background in, just letting it sit the full time. Don't rinse it out too early. If it says 30 minutes, I'd let it sit for 45. That's just my own honest opinion. I have really never dealt with bleeding. With this, I still would section out, like I would rinse this section out and then this section out separately. I wouldn't chance it because I'm not like crazy, but it still is unlikely. Even when I rinsed all of this out yesterday, I had no bleeding, and I let it sit for probably about an hour. And this is all Pravana color, by the way. I think I mentioned that, but yeah, I don't have any trouble with bleeding. If you're worried about bleeding or stuff sitting on top of something else, which I kind of lay mine, I don't like flatten them all down. I kind of like lay them gently on top of each other. But usually I'll use mesh as well, or some sort of see-through placement so I can still see the color. I didn't use it today just because I wanted you guys to be able to see. However, if you are just starting out, just for safety measure, Framar, Maniac Mesh, or some sort of like saran wrap style stuff would really help. Just kind of keep those things separated. So, but that is a good question. Processing time is key. You guys, that's one of the most important things you can do. Let that baby sit. Okay, so I'm gonna get started on this other section because I just realized that we're already kind of cutting it close on time. I told you I talk a lot, so I wanna show you guys a little bit of the other color palette though. So again, this was a last minute decision. I literally was gonna color this, that color, and I was like, you know, I don't wanna do something totally crazy. So I'm gonna section this out and we're gonna do the opposite. So that piece at the end is gonna be the blue and green melt, which I was just showing you guys back there. And this front section, I'm gonna do the warm palette, which is the yellow, the kind of coral pink, and then the coral orange, I should say, and then the violet. So okay, so if you guys have any questions about this one, because even though it's the same concept of color melting, it is much different, and the colors are not, you know, I like to say that these colors back here, they're family. They blend very well, and these colors are kind of just getting to know each other because they are a little bit more difficult to blend. They don't blend as easily. They don't kind of like fall softly into one another, just like the back section did, so. And we're going to start with yellow, make sure that's a thin section. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my yellow color first, again, making sure I have no hairs hanging on here. And then, oh, there's another heavy time. I take one off, there's another one that's coming. So I'll start underneath. And then I will go on top. I'll pull that down gently. I'll kind of softly swoop it. I don't like to create hard lines of demarcation because, like I said, it's just going to be so much harder to blend afterwards. And we want to make our job easy. So this color looks very pink going on. Once I bring that color into the yellow, it's going to create that really kind of like corally orange color, which is what I love about it. But just be mindful though, the more you bring it in, the more it changes the color that's actually on this, because once these two colors meet, it makes something completely different. And for blending colors, that's kind of my goal. But if that's not what your goal is, then you might have a harder line, but you'll definitely have more of a true tone of the color you're applying. So same concept. I still go back in there vertically and I just do really quick little wisps before I go in and blend it back and forth. And the reason I do this first is because it doesn't drag as much of that other color into my color that I have on the brush. This definitely will drag more of that, and then it kind of can just spread and get all over the place. And this color yellow and any of the neons are so pigmented that as soon as it touches it, it's game over. That color is there. So starting with this technique I found helps me blur that line of demarcation, and then this kind of just makes sure it's saturated in there. Takes a little bit longer, but you know how I feel about taking your time. So for me, it's super worth it. And then I'll just drag this color down a little bit. Same, softly, not creating too harsh of a line. I'll always hold the hair out like this with my other hand, and then while I'm doing that, I'll take this hand and wipe all that color off. If it's a color that is like in between your fingers and stuff, I'll just gently lay it down. I don't let I don't let things just like fall. Sorry about that, I'm a hairdresser. And then I'll always wipe between my fingers, making sure that there's no color in there. Because again, that yellow is so, it just wants to be everywhere on the head. So just make sure that you got everything off. And then I'll take that last color and I'll always saturate the end first just to kind of create grip for me. So I'll saturate and then I'll pick, and then I will do the same thing. Sometimes I'll even use my brush as a backboard. I'll just hold it there while I wipe my other hand. I can do that a little bit faster, but if you can just like gently hold it right there, it kind of helps instead of having to like use your hand, take this brush down. Okay, so I'll just go in there vertically, drag this color down a little bit, and then I'll blend back and forth. With this color, it is a little bit harder to blend these colors together than it is the other. So sometimes if I feel like I need to drag that middle color down a little bit more, I can go back and do that. Like I said, these colors do not blend as easily together, and it's okay to kind of go in and perfect something. The only thing you don't want to do is oversaturate something or overthink it, because most of the time it's good and then we do too much and then it becomes something that we're like, oh, we should have stopped there. So I'll just drag this color down a little bit more, and I'll do the same kind of back and forth, drag it down. And I always finish with the last color just to make sure that it is blended right there. Very meticulous, super tedious work, but I promise it's worth it every time. One thing I've found, and that's completely changed my life, is I'd rather do something right the first time than have to feel like I need to go in and correct it later on, because you're really just doing more work for yourself. Say it's a real client too. You're like, okay, now that client has to come back and I have to take a whole nother day in which I'm probably not getting paid for because it was my mistake, or just whatever the case may be. I want to like be done with that one client or that one service and be like, I killed it. It's great. And I don't have to worry about anything else until I see her 6 to 8 weeks from now. So that's really important, taking your time. And then again, I'll just keep doing this throughout, here, I'll turn this a little bit so you can see, but I'll just keep doing this throughout the whole section. Same small, tiny little section sizes. And that's it. So if you guys have any other questions, I know we're probably cutting it close on time. Anything related to hair or anything else for that matter.
We have several, so that's perfect. An earlier question from Miguel. Miguel says, I'm a barber and I like to work for color, but it's really hard to find people to get those colors in their hair. So Miguel is wondering, what can be an idea for those first color jobs in order to find people and get that confidence in getting the color?
Oh, totally. So I love that a barber's in here too. A lot of my educational background is actually teaching barbers how to color. We had a huge crossover in the industry and I love seeing it. We have a lot of barbers learning how to do color and a lot of colorists learning how to do barber work. So thank you for being here. And a great way to get started with that, people seem to opt for like wanting to go silver or like lilac or just blonde. So maybe just getting them comfortable with the lightening process, because I find that that's the hardest part, you know, understanding how to lighten hair, how to get it to the right canvas. So having a background in that's really important. And then also your client becomes comfortable with sitting in a chair for that long, having a color other than their natural. Softer colors usually are a good way to start. I would start with maybe, like I said, blondes or soft pinks or soft lilac, something that washes out really nicely. It doesn't leave them like with maybe a muddy fade or you know, I guess, yeah, color fade. Yeah, you just want to be careful with that part too. Speaking of like the fades of color, I don't even like saying fade. That's why I kind of got stuck there, is because I don't really like to call it a fade of color. I call it the evolution of the color, because I feel like choosing the right color palette for each person and the right, you know, canvas you're applying it on, I feel like every fade out is beautiful and can be and should be beautiful. If they're taking care of their hair the right way, when they come back in 6 to 8 weeks, their hair should be like still looking super poppin'. They should be getting compliments as they walk in the door for their next appointment, you know? So making sure that you're understanding the undertones of everyone's hair and what colors fade and what colors, what are the undertones in the colors you're applying to the hair. That's really important. So, but yeah, especially for you, his name Miguel, I believe. If you're just getting started, feel free to send me a message, and I'd love to talk to you about that too. I'm sure having a background in lightening hair is going to be your best friend for understanding color theory and color concept and color palettes a lot more.
We also have a few people asking about you particularly. Did you take any crossover programs, barbering, or were you self-taught? And then to add on another question, are there any classes you recommend when it comes to wigs? So questions about barber crossover programs, your history with that, and then do you recommend any classes for wigs?
Okay, so lots of information there. Nobody really knows this. I mean, unless you've already taken a class by me or know me personally, but the first 2 years of me having my license, I actually only cut men's hair. I was a barber, essentially. I had a cosmetology license, but I only cut men's hair for the first 2 years. And then it crossed over into color more because I enjoyed it. But initially starting out, I really just wanted a safe kind of job, and in my small town, there wasn't a lot of like high-end salons or really salons at all. So I started out cutting hair. So I really never took a crossover program. However, I started working and connecting and collaborating with a lot of other barbers that taught me so much more than I ever learned even in those 2 years. And that has like opened up the doors for me as far as crossover in the industry goes. I took a lot of classes, barber-based classes. And again, I have that background in barbering, but taking classes from people who have dedicated their lives to it is much different than going to cosmetology school or going to barber school even. So I would suggest the same vice versa. If you're a barber and you want to learn about color, take classes from people who have dedicated their lives to it. Take classes from people who have like just narrowed down every single detail of their job, because that's what's going to give you the most insight the quickest. And just take a bunch of classes, don't be afraid to just invest, a year or two of your time and then consistently throughout your career to just learning more. And right when you think you know everything, our industry changes and there's a new trend or there's a new technique or there's a new way to do things. And it's so important to continue to evolve with our industry. So that would be my suggestion. And that is my history, which now you guys know I was technically a barber first. And I actually don't cut men's hair anymore. I have about 50 to 60% clientele that is, men or short hair, and it's all color. So it's kind of crazy how my world kind of circled back to working on men's hair, but now in a completely different world. So really cool. And I love to be affiliated and associated with other really incredibly talented barbers. So you want to refresh my memory on that next question too?
Yeah, that covered most of that. Are there any particular classes that you recommend? And then I have a couple questions for you on specific products. So any classes that you'd like to recommend to people? And also for everyone attending, I've just dropped Kimberly's Booksy page to explore. So if you want to see what she was referencing in terms of how she has her page set up, you can see that as well. But classes.
Okay, so classes on wigs. I actually have one myself. I did it about 2 years ago, and I'd be happy to send anybody that link. It is online, I believe, on Behind the Chair. So you guys are welcome to go watch that one. Highly recommend it. I drop a lot of knowledge as far as it goes for like brands and how to get started with that. But I watch I have probably 3 to 4 hairstylists I follow who are primarily wig artists, and I follow their Instagrams and their TikToks religiously. And really, we have it so easy now as far as logging on Instagram or TikTok. It is an education. It's like a YouTube platform in that. So I find a lot of inspiration and education even through those platforms from people who have 10 plus years of experience in the wig world, because I'm still learning about wigs every day as far as it goes for like installations and how to care for them and all that kind of stuff. So just really do some research on people who do that kind of work that you're looking for. Maybe they're, have good energy. That's really important to me too. It's like making sure that they're people who like, I want to, aspire to be like, or have something similar in that sense. But I just do a lot of research on people online. And then one person will share another person's page of her educational class and kind of just evolves from there. But I probably, even as an educator myself, I have about 4 monthly subscriptions for different educational platforms, because for me, not everybody does everything the way I do, and they may know stuff that I don't know. And that's how I continue to evolve, and that's how I grow. And it makes me a better colorist, a better educator, and just a better artist, like all around. So, will gladly share the link for the wig tutorial. I think it's about an hour long as well, and I go over a lot of stuff. But aside from that, I would just do a lot of research on people who have incredibly talented backgrounds in that specific category that you're looking for, and just, you know, stay up to date on the stuff that they're sharing. So, but.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Okay. So in our last few minutes, a couple product questions for you. These are from Nancy, Jessica, and Linan. So do you have a recommendation for where to get practice mannequins, a recommendation on good color brushes when it comes to Vivids? And I just lost the last one. Oh, do you so sorry. Do you have a recommendation on what to use to seal Vivids? So brushes, mannequins, and sealing Vivids.
Okay, so this mannequin is hair art. I absolutely love them. If you can't tell how blonde this is, I think that this is their Bianca, and it's my favorite because it's going to give you the optimal brightness and vibrancy for each mannequin. They have other color options too. Obviously, they have some that are more like of a yellow blonde, which I feel like is really important because not every client's going to live to this. And so understanding, again, the base of what you're applying your creative color on is essentially what's going to give you that, you know, that realistic color. For me, I chose this one obviously just to showcase the absolute insanely vibrant colors that we can do. But yeah, they have a ton of options on there. They have really long wig or long mannequin heads, really short ones. They have some for barbering, for cutting that already come for that. So they're my absolute favorite hair art. I think that this one's probably about $60. And like I said, I removed color out of this. I had color in this and I removed color out of it. So if you are like, I don't want to pay for two, or I can't afford to pay for two, you can just gently remove that color back out and just use it for something else. Because for me, it's for practice. For me, it's for, you know, maybe if I don't have a client, but I want to do something cool, or I don't have someone who wants to do that, I can kind of like demo that on here and still showcase it on my Instagram or TikTok platforms. As far as color brushes go, I use strictly Frame Art everything. It's just been like the best thing in the world for me. Not even just their color brushes, their clips, their gloves. I have really long nails and usually they're pointy if you can't tell, and like I don't have them break. Like they are literally invincible. So I love them. But so my favorite Frame Art brushes are going to be these traditional ones. I think they're about $2 and they're just so sturdy brushes. Like they're not too hard, but they're like soft enough. It's just, they give such like a clean, swift application. And then let me show you one more thing. They actually have some that are about half that size, but the same brush. This is good for sections like this front piece where it's not, you know, a super large section, but I just want to get in there and get like a really detailed application. Love those. And they have an Emperor brush too, which is a brush that has the same concept of these bristles, but on the back side is a comb. So that's really good if you're doing like maybe one color application or just a two-tone color melt. You can kind of like brush and then comb through, make sure that everything is super saturated. And then I think there was one more question.
Yep, sealing Vivids. And then I think I've got one final question to end our webinar, but about sealing Vivids.
So there is products that you can actually use to like literally seal Vivids. It comes in the same style of like a direct dye tube. I don't use that as much because I feel like the brands that I work with and use give me enough kind of seal on its own. I also use the B3 oil because that helps with sealing in my Vivids. It helps with the longevity of the color. It helps with the vibrancy of the color. And the great part about that is it's not an additional step. You literally put it in the color, and so it's just already in there. That's been like the best for me. Another way to like seal the Vivids is not really sealing them, but just letting them sit, like we were talking about, the full processing time, because that is going to like optimize your longevity. That's one of the most important parts about keeping that color locked in there, is letting it sit for the full processing time. Because if you think about it, same with demi and permanent colors, if you don't let it sit the full time, it's not going to give you the full result. So creative color, demi permanent colors, it's just as important to make sure that you're doing that. So you know, kind of like toner too. If you put something on and you're like, oh my gosh, it's grabbing too fast, it's because we didn't formulate right. So what we need to do is make sure that we're applying the right formula to the canvas that we're working on, and we won't have any worry about letting it sit for the 45 minutes to an hour if we want. So, but
brilliant. Yeah. And then one final question about color removal before we wrap this up. And thank you so much, everyone. We tried to get to all of your questions today. They were amazing. Thank you all for participating. So this last question that I'm going to give you, Kimberly, is from Allison, who wants to know, what do you use for color removing for someone's touch-up? She says, I feel like I don't have positive results with blank canvas, but so many people do. So do you use foils? Do you do oversaturated lightener or soap caps? Like, do you have a particular recommendation for that?
Absolutely. So for me, blank canvas or color removers essentially are lightener. It's powder with the developer, and essentially I feel like it just maybe is targeted for that, so it pulls out a lot faster. However, I like to use just regular lightener, but a really thick or a really like runny consistency. So instead of using 1:1 or 1:1.5, I'll use 1 to 2.5. So 1 part lightener, 2.5 parts developer. With a low developer, on this one I used 5 volume or 6 volume with a 1 to 2.5 ratio. It was on damp hair because I can work through that a lot faster, and it's gonna like really saturate and grab to the color more. I feel like when I apply the lightener on creative color dry hair, it doesn't spread as easily, and that way it can leave some, hollow spots or, some spots that have that color still in there. So it's essentially what we call a wet balayage. I apply a lightener mixture on wet or damp hair. I use it to brighten up my blondes. I use it to pull out old color. I use it to fix spots that I may be messed up on. But that's my best recommendation. I've tried color removers like Malibu Sea. Those things are great, but for this kind of stuff, it definitely needs something a little bit stronger. My only recommendation would be making sure that your client's hair can handle it. Don't put like a 20 volume on there if you have to do the whole head, and then this front sections, because underneath that color is that blonde still. So we have to be mindful of that. But I would go slow and low, 5 to 10 volume, and let that sit for usually about 20 minutes. But you can also just kind of work through the hair and see, as that color is kind of coming out. So one last thing I'm going to add on to that, though, because I learned this the hard way, when I was a young stylist just starting out, is work with the color wheel. If your client's green won't come out of the hair, don't keep putting liner on it. Tone her with a soft pink to neutralize that color out, because then you're going to create a blank canvas a lot more safely and a lot quicker, because I'm telling you that mint green, like, it just not coming out. That stuff stays in there so hard. So making sure that you're understanding the color wheel and working with it and trying to push against it, because that's just going to be bad for your client's hair in the long run.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you to everyone who has been here for today's webinar. Your questions were amazing, and they gave us even more insight on all of the mere magic that goes into Vivid Festival hair. So thank you so much, Kimberly. This was wonderful. We have all, I guarantee I speak for everyone here when I say we have all learned so much. For everyone who has attended today's webinar, or if you weren't able to and you're going to join us later, you will be able to find this webinar as well as our previous Booksy educational webinars on our YouTube page. And as a final reminder, if you're interested in joining Booksy, we did drop a link in the chat where you can try a 2-week trial, join the Booksy community, see what you think. Also, take a look at Kimberly's page and see what you can create for yourself with that Booksy profile, because it really is incredibly personalizable, and you can create something that allows you to have success with your clients every time. So thank you, Kimberly, so much.
Thank you, guys. I just want to end it on, I appreciate every one of you coming in here. And if there's anything that we couldn't touch on today, like she said, you always feel free to reach out to me on my Instagram, whether it's about color, whether it's about school, education, or Booksy, anything. I'm so happy to talk with you guys, and I really appreciate you guys spending your hour on your Monday with us.
And if you think that you want to have more Booksy education with the amazing KimberlyTayHair, make sure that you let us know and post about how great this webinar is so that we can get her back here for another one.
I love that. I would love to. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.